In this video, we will discuss the summary and themes of Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. In the early 1700s, Britain's politics changed a lot. While Queen Anne ruled, the Tory party was in power, supporting strong royal authority and limiting Parliament's influence. But when King George I became king in 1714, the Whig party gained control, pushing the Tories out. Jonathan Swift, a Tory, used Gulliver's Travels, especially the Lilliput section, to mock the conflicts between the Whigs and Tories. Let's see the important characters in Gulliver's Travels. Lemuel Gulliver is the protagonist and narrator of the novel. He is a surgeon and traveler who visits strange lands, each offering a satirical perspective on human nature and society. The Emperor of Lilliput, the ruler of Lilliput, is a small minded and power hungry leader. He represents the arrogance and pettiness of European rulers. The King of Brobdingnag is a wise and fair ruler of the land of Janes. He listens to Gulliver's stories about England and criticizes European politics and warfare. The Queen of Brobdingnag treats Gulliver kindly and keeps him as a pet in her court. She enjoys his company and provides him with protection. Lord Munody is a nobleman from Balnibarbi who is practical and rational, unlike his fellow citizens. He represents wisdom and good governance. The master Huinhum, a highly intelligent horse who leads Gulliver to admire the Huinhum's rational and peaceful way of life. He symbolizes reason and morality. The Yahoos is a wild and filthy human-like species living among the Huinhums. They represent the worst traits of humanity: greed, cruelty, and ignorance. Let's see the summary of Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's first voyage in Gulliver's Travels takes him to Lilliput, an island inhabited by tiny people only 6 inches tall. After a shipwreck, he awakens to find himself captured by the Lilliputians, who initially treat him with kindness and curiosity. They provide him with food and shelter, and in return, he helps them solve various problems, particularly their conflict with Blefuscu, a neighboring island. Gulliver earns the Emperor's favor by aiding Lilliput in its war against Blefuscu, but his loyalty comes into question when he refuses to support the Emperor's plan to enslave the Blefuscudians. Gulliver's downfall begins when he extinguishes a fire in the royal palace by urinating on it, an act that, despite saving lives, is deemed treasonous. He is soon charged with additional crimes, and a faction of the court conspires against him. Facing the threat of execution, Gulliver flees to Blefuscu, where he is welcomed by the inhabitants. There he finds and repairs a large warship, using it to escape the island. Eventually, Gulliver is rescued at sea by an English merchant ship and returns home. His experience in Lilliput exposes the absurdity of political conflicts, as the Lilliputians are portrayed as petty and self-important despite their small stature. Their exaggerated sense of power and rigid legalism contrast sharply with Gulliver's rationality, highlighting the satire in Jonathan Swift's critique of European politics. Gulliver's second voyage takes him to Brobdingnag, a land of giants where he is as small to its inhabitants as the Lilliputians were to him. While traveling as a ship's surgeon, Gulliver and a small crew land on an island to search for fresh water. However, they soon realize the island is inhabited by enormous beings. In a panic, the crew flees, abandoning Gulliver, who is captured by a giant farmer. Though initially terrified, Gulliver is treated with kindness. The farmer assigns his daughter, Glumdalclitch, to care for him, and she looks after him with great affection. Seeing potential profit in his unusual captive, the farmer takes Gulliver on a tour across the countryside, exhibiting him like a curiosity. Crowds gather to marvel at the miniature man, paying to see him perform tricks. As this exhausting routine begins to wear Gulliver down, his fortune changes when the Queen of Brobdingnag takes an interest in him and purchases him from the farmer. At court, he is given a comfortable life, and Glumdalclitch remains by his side as his caretaker. Gulliver gains the king's attention and spends much time discussing England's customs and politics. He proudly describes his homeland, but to his dismay, the king reacts with horror and disappointment. The king finds England's political corruption, wars, and greed appealing, exposing the flaws of European civilization. Through these conversations, Gulliver is humbled, realizing how grotesque and small minded he must have seemed to the Lilliputians in his previous voyage. The contrast between Brobdingnag's relatively simple yet virtuous society and England's moral corruption serves as a powerful satire on human nature and governance. One day, while resting inside his portable room, a specially designed box on the beach, Gulliver is suddenly carried away by an eagle. The bird eventually drops the box into the sea, leaving Gulliver stranded. Fortunately, a passing ship discovers the floating chest and rescues him. He is returned to England and reunites with his family, but his perspective on humanity has been forever altered by his experiences among the giants. Swift's satire in Brobdingnag highlights the pettiness of human affairs as seen through the eyes of those who are physically and morally superior to Gulliver's own people. Gulliver's third voyage takes him to strange and fascinating lands, including Laputa, Balnibarbi, Glubdubdrib, and Lugnag. While traveling on a ship to the Levant, Gulliver is made captain of a small boat sent to trade with nearby islands. However, pirates attack his boat, leaving him alone in a small vessel to drift at sea. Eventually, he sees a large floating island in the sea. This flying island is called Laputa. Its people are obsessed with mathematics, music, and astronomy, but they lack common sense. They are so lost in thought that they need servants to shake them or hit them with sticks to bring them back to reality. The Laputans use magnetic forces to move their island up, down, and sideways, controlling the land below called Balnibarbi. However, their scientific experiments are often useless and their country suffers because of it. Gulliver then visits Balnibarbi, where he sees people trying to grow food using strange and ridiculous methods that never work. From there, he travels to the island of Glubdubdrib, where the ruler has magical powers. Here, Gulliver is able to call back the dead and speak to famous historical figures like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. He learns that much of what is written in history books is false, as past rulers and scholars were not as wise or noble as people believe. Next, Gulliver arrives in Lugnag, where he meets the Stuldrugs, a race of people who are born with immortality. At first, he thinks they are lucky, but he soon realizes that they are miserable. Instead of staying young forever, they continue to age, growing weaker and more unhappy as time passes. After leaving Lugnag, Gulliver reaches Japan, where he meets the Japanese emperor. From there, he travels to Amsterdam and finally returns home to England. This voyage teaches him about the dangers of extreme thinking, the false nature of history, and the reality that living forever is not a blessing but a curse. Gulliver's fourth and final voyage takes him to the land of Houyhnhnms, where intelligent horses rule over wild human-like creatures called yahoos. The Houyhnhnms live simple, rational, and peaceful lives, while the yahoos are filthy, brutal, and full of human-like vices. Gulliver quickly grows to love the Houyhnhnms and despises the Yahoos, eventually realizing that he is more like a Yahoo than a Houyhnhnm. While serving as captain of a merchant ship sailing to Barbados and Leeward Islands, Gulliver faces trouble when some of his crew fall sick and die. To replace them, he hires new sailors in Barbados, but they turn out to be pirates. The pirates convince the remaining crew to mutiny and abandon Gulliver on an unknown island. There, he is attacked by a group of disgusting, wild, human like creatures later identified as Yahoos. They throw dirt and excrement at him from the trees. Gulliver is rescued by a Houyhnhnm, a highly intelligent horse, who takes him to his home. There, Gulliver meets a horse's family, including his mare, wife, and young ones, as well as a servant horse. He also sees that Yahoos are kept in pens, treated like animals. Gulliver is disturbed to realize that, except for his clothing, he looks exactly like the Yahoos. Over time, Gulliver becomes close to the Houyhnhnms and engages in long discussions with his master, a wise grey horse. They talk about human society, the bad behavior of Yahoos, and the perfect order of Houyhnhnm life. Gulliver admires the Houyhnhnms so much that he wishes to stay with them forever. However, the ruling assembly decides that Gulliver, being a Yahoo, cannot stay among them. He must either live with the wild Yahoos or leave their land. Heartbroken, Gulliver builds a small boat and sails away. He eventually reaches another island where he is found by a Portuguese ship's crew. The captain, a kind man, takes him to Lisbon and gives him shelter. But Gulliver is disgusted by humans, whom he now sees as Yahoos, and struggles to be around them. Finally, he returns home to England, but he can no longer bear the sight of his own family. To avoid them, he buys two horses and spends most of his time in the stable talking to them as if they were Houyhnhnms. Gulliver never fully recovers from this time with the wise horses, and he remains distant from humans for the rest of his life. Let's see the important themes of Gulliver's travels. The first major theme is might versus right. In Gulliver's travels, Swift raises the question of whether physical strength or moral goodness should determine who holds power in society. Gulliver sees both sides of this issue. In Lilliput, he is a giant and can easily defeat their enemies, the Blefuscudians, simply because of his size. However, when he visits Brobdingnag, he is tiny and struggles to survive as everything around him is much larger. He experiences being physically overpowered when the small Lilliputians tie him down, and later in Brobdingnag, when he is treated like a pet by a farmer, he also sees physical force used against others, such as the way the Houyhnhnms chain up the Yahoos. At the same time, many rulers in the novel claim that their power is justified by their moral superiority. The war between Lilliput and Blefuscu is not just about cultural differences, but about a religious and moral dispute over how to break an egg properly. Both sides believe their interpretation of their holy book is correct, which they use as reason to go to war. Similarly, the Houyhnhnms believe they have the right to control the Yahoos, but they see themselves as cleaner, better behaved, and more rational. Swift suggests that claims of moral superiority are often just excuses for using force. The Laputans rule Balnibarbi through force, thinking they are more rational than the people below them, but they seem foolish and detached from reality. The rulers of Balnibarbi also believe they are right to remove Lord Munodi from power, but readers can see that Munodi is actually the wise one. In the end, Gulliver's Travels shows that claims of moral righteousness are often as baseless as using brute force to control others. The second theme, the individual versus society. In every land Gulliver visits, people are expected to follow social rules. These rules can be strict, and breaking them can have serious consequences. In Lilliput, Gulliver is sentenced to death because he helps the enemy country's ambassadors, which is against the rules of the royal court. Even in Houyhnhnm land, where there is no king, Gulliver's master faces pressure from others to exile him because he is seen as a Yahoo. Many travel stories describe utopias, perfect societies where everything works well. This idea goes back to Plato's Republic and Thomas More's Utopia. Swift refers to these works but is skeptical about the idea of a perfect society. He shows that utopias often prioritize the group over the individual. In Plato's Republic, children are raised communally with no knowledge of their parents to create fairness. In Lilliput, children are also raised collectively, but the society is still full of conspiracies and betrayals. The Huim come closer to the utopian ideal. They are wise and rational, and they control their population by making families with two female children exchange a daughter with families that have two male children. However, Swift makes them seem unsettling because they lack individuality. They do not even have proper names and their personalities are indistinguishable. They are so rational that they all seem the same. Gulliver feels like he belongs nowhere. He does not feel connected to England as his father's estate is too small to support him and his job as a surgeon does not bring much success. He never expresses love for his homeland and is always eager to leave. Gulliver's Travels can be seen as one of the first novels about modern alienation, the feeling of not belonging anywhere. By the end of the book, Gulliver is bitter and antisocial, preferring to talk to horses rather than people. Swift seems to suggest that both extreme conformity and extreme individualism can lead to unhappiness. The third theme is the limits of human understanding. Swift also explores the idea that humans are not meant to know everything. He criticizes people who believe that knowledge is the most important thing. The Laputans, who are obsessed with theoretical knowledge, look down on those who do not spend all their time thinking about abstract ideas. However, they seem ridiculous and unable to handle basic practical matters. Similarly, in Barney's Academy, scholars waste time on useless experiments like trying to extract sunbeams from cucumbers without producing any real results. Swift argues that humans should accept that their understanding has limits. The societies that seem the most rational, such as Bobdingnag and Huinhum Island, do not focus on abstract knowledge but on practical wisdom and steady living. Instead of valuing theoretical ideas, they focus on living well. Swift suggests that people should recognize their limits and not try to understand everything as some knowledge may be beyond human reach.